So as we wrap up on housing, we're going to talk about housing costs, and this is going to lead in nice to the personal budgeting part we're going to deal with a little later this week. Um, how much of your budget you should be looking towards housing, which gets harder and harder by the day, but we can make this work. And so typically there's what's called a 30% rule for housing costs. Some people may even say 25, but in today's society, that's darn near impossible. So that basically just means that we're going to spend no more than 30% of gross income. So that's before taxes and stuff on housing expenses. So if you make, I'll just make up something. If you make $5,000 a month, you shouldn't be spending more than $1,500 on your housing expenses. And again, what does all that take in? It's not just your mortgage payment, housing insurance, and real estate taxes, stuff we've talked about. That also would include utilities and maintenance. So stuff to clean, stuff to update things when it breaks, your gas, your electrical, things like that. And so when you start to take all that into consideration, this gets expensive, which is why so many people, when they just think, oh, it's a mortgage payment, that's all I have, no big deal, then don't realize this stuff, get themselves into trouble. So when you're doing a monthly cost, instead of, I guess I'll just call it this for lack of a better word, we're going to call this the sum of your housing expenses, which basically is going to be those plus maybe a couple of other small things, but that's the majors that you're going to run into. And so to figure out your maximum housing expense, this is probably going to make sense here. You're going to take your gross income times 0.30. So don't look at your paycheck and do 30%. That's going to be net. That's after you take all the other expenses and things out that you have taken out of a check, which we've seen. You know, FICA, insurance, Social Security, union dues in some cases, things like that. And so we're going to multiply that by 0.3. So lots of numbers to play with, but we're going to get to the bottom of it. So Jessica recorded her housing costs. Good idea. That's how you figure all this stuff out. So mortgage payment, yes, insurance, taxes, electricity, internet, water. Oh, I forgot about that before. And repairs. Okay, let's see here. It adds up in a hurry, is one mention I'll make here. I think I got them all there. So with all of our costs there, instead of writing that all out, we'll put it this way so we can get those. Her total gross income for the month was $3270.92. And we'd be shooting for 30% of that, we hope. Ooh, 981.28. Oh yeah, we have a problem here. So, is the total cost monthly less than recommended? Well, no. Let's take it a little further. So, if I do, let's do a little percentage work here. I know it's not asking for that, but this is how far off we're going to find out she is. So, Jessa, actually, I'm going to do this a part at a time. Overspent by like $342. But if we want to look at it percentage-wise, we're about 35% over. Like, it's not close. It's not a little bit over. That's a lot over. If that continues over time, something is going to get hammered. It might be food, it might be a vehicle, it could be all sorts of things, but something here is probably going to have to change. So, just something to consider. So, one other one, because again, I want to make sure this is something I preach a lot when I'm talking to people, adults, individually with this stuff. Like, you might like the neighborhood, you might like the kids, you might like the schools, you might like the house, but let's be honest. Oops, that doesn't get circled for this. If you can't afford it, that's not a blessing, that's a curse. And so, and home repairs. All right. So 15, 28, 19. Let's see if Arion's any closer here. Gross income, 30%. 1232. 79. Oh, Arian, you're not much better. So again, no. Let's see how badly this one's off. And I'll be honest, this is normal. Like, it's not good, but it's normal. Let's see how bad we're off this time. I think this one's slightly better, but not much. 24% over. This is why people live paycheck to paycheck. Housing costs can get to be so expensive that you basically got to figure out what you're going to throw away. So, again, play with some of these after a little bit here at the bottom, just to kind of get a feel for some stuff. But this is how regular monthly budgeting needs to work. Am I staying within my means or not? And when we look at that, which we'll do in the next unit, you can finally start to see some of the things that you can trim to get by, at least for the time being, until hopefully you can get a raise, find a better job, whatever that happens to be. So the 30% here for housing is only part of the story. The other percentages also have their places. So here's kind of how this works. Typically, you're going to run 50% on needs, otherwise known as must-haves. Okay, like what? Food, clothing, transportation. We're already including the 30%, into some other things. Housing. You're like, wait a minute. I thought you said the housing was 30. That would be included in a need, though. These I like to call the four walls of living. So if housing's taking up 30, these other ones would take up the other 20. So that's why when I say when people overspend on housing, you are going to end up having to trim way back somewhere else and kind of keep that up. So, okay, what's the 30 then? %30 is wants. Maybe you want a fancier car. Maybe you like going out to eat a lot. Maybe you like going out to things to be entertained. That would go in the wants category. That can end up getting trimmed if the needs are becoming a problem. And then 20% to savings and pay off debt. And I'll tell you, what's happening right now with a lot of people in America, this 20% is going straight into that needs category because things are expensive. So it's becoming 70% needs, 30% wants, and no savings. Because a majority of Americans couldn't deal with a $500 emergency. So, again, monthly expenses, have versus want. Okay, that I'll let you kind of think through on your own. I mean, that could be anything. At my house, an example of a want. My wife and son like going to Starbucks. To me, that's a want. That is not a must-have. But then they think some of the things that I buy food-wise are the same thing, and they're right. So, again, do you have to have it to live? If not, it's a want. So, when you're calculating this, notice we have changed incomes. We're not doing gross now, we're doing net. The actual money you take home, 50% of it would be on needs. The actual money you take home, 30% we hope on wants, but if we have to transfer a little here for the time being, we may have to. And then hopefully, why did I call this network? I don't know. Net income, Hardy. Would be the other 20. But again, we may have to move some of these, depending on how things are going. Hopefully not. So, Dawn has a monthly net income of $53,2680. She's trying to stick to the 50-30-20 budget. All right. So, if that's true, and I know a lot of the math that we've done in here seems basic, simple, sometimes even like beneath us, but at the same time, those are the things that people let, mess their lives up. So when Dawn looks at this and sees, okay, needs $26,6340. If you're looking at a house payment, let's say that's $1,300. You have $1,300 left for food and for transportation and gas and all the stuff with that. That's not much. So we've got to kind of think this out. So what I typically will be able to find if I look at somebody's personal budget is, let's say they're over in this category. I usually personally don't have a problem finding at least half of these that we can move here if we want to. Now, they might not be happy with me, but sometimes we got to do things we don't want for a bit. Quick story, I was helping a couple of years ago, and we were looking at their budget. And I went after their wants category. I went after both of them. The lady of the household liked clothes a lot, and the man of the household liked redoing a bunch of stuff on his classic car. And so I got in there, and I'm like, okay, this clothing allowance, it's got to go down. Well, how am I supposed to do that? She goes, you dress nice. What do you? And then I explained to her the most expensive thing on my person at the time was the $10 that I'd spared on my pair of pants. I said, I spent probably less on my outfit than some of you were spending, eating out today. And I'm never afraid to tell people, I admit it. I'll shop things at Goodwill. Some of that stuff's better than the things I can get in a news store. And it's like a quarter of the price. So you got to do what you got to do for the time being. And if I don't have this for savings right now, maybe I got to take another $500 for the time being and put it in here. That's okay. And so, again, play with these a bit. This isn't something normally that parents want to talk with their kids about, especially if it's a struggle. But if you can learn some of this stuff, maybe you can change the family tree some if that's actually a struggle. So, again, play with a couple of these. Play with a couple of those in the front. Tomorrow we're going to mix between a small quiz preview, which kind of goes back over this stuff again, and then just a small little tiny research thing that I want you to do that we're going to have in class before the quiz. And then we'll get into the personal budgeting stuff on